Hello, investors. This is Todd Thomas, Associate Portfolio Manager with Revere Asset Management. Today is Saturday, November 8th. The time is 9:30 a.m. Coming to you from Boca Raton, Florida, to bring you the Revere Weekend Review. Going to the trend gauge, some downgrades this past week as we are now in neutral territory for the market leaders, as several leaders did well for the week, but several also broke down, and a lot of interweek volatility with uh, a test of the 50-day moving averages on the major indexes. However, we did downgrade the short term as both major indexes are now below that 21-day moving average. We continue to keep the yellow sub cautionary arrow uh, over the medium term 50-day as the S&P equal weight and mid caps are below that, and the long-term indexes are all above the 200-day moving average. Overall, sharp interweek pullback and test of the 50-day holds on Friday afternoon as we rally into the close on Friday to show the bulls defended that key 50-day moving average. But overall, some damage on the week as the Big Eight closed down 3%, the RG8 down 3.48%, with, I think, over a 9% drop in the IBD 50 this week, as well as the ARC fund. Those were the two biggest losers on the week. S&P down 1.63, but the equal weight down 0.2. Q's down 3.07 with the equal weight down 2.6. Dow down 1.21, mid caps down 0.1%. Russell 2000 down 1.88, 60/40 down 0.95, GROTECTION down 2.52, and Turbo down 2.27. Also, let's go through some of the key events of this past week. Again, we talked about the indexes and the hold of the 50. NASDAQ suffered its worst weekly loss since April at a 3% drop. Stocks making new lows outpaced new highs all week, and that started the week before. We did get a bounce as Schumer said Democrats would vote to end the shutdown if Republicans agreed to extend the healthcare tax credits for 1 year. But that was quickly denied as the Republicans voted that down and said it was a non-starter. The shutdown continues at day 38 through this morning, which is the longest in history. Despite the Democrat proposal getting shot down, the market continued to rally throughout the afternoon, perhaps on the hopes that a deal would be struck over the weekend. Chip stocks suffered a 4% loss on the SMH as beat and raise quarters from AMD, ALAB, and ARM resulted in those stocks closing lower on the week. Musk's $1 trillion pay package was approved. Couple notable deals in the data center as IREN struck a $10 billion AI deal with Microsoft. Cipher also announced a similar deal with Amazon Web Services. Overall, Democrats scored big wins in elections in New York, Virginia, New Jersey. Also, the Pennsylvania Democrats managed the majority on the Supreme Court, and California approved a redistricting plan to counterbalance a similar effort by Texas. Earnings standouts on the week. Here's a list, but especially in the memory area, SanDisk. Light had a great week. Lemonade, Teva, Sanmina, and so on. All those charts will be displayed in the weekly review. New buys of top performing stock funds came out this week as we enter a new month, the first weekend of the new month. A couple still holding up. Celestica still had 734 million of new buys, but one of the big changes you're going to see here are some of these stocks like Palantir, which had several multi-hundred million to billion-dollar buys, virtually hardly any buys at all. So you're seeing some of these big funds perhaps fully loaded in many of these big names. Nextracker continues with a nice $1.9 billion buys on the month. But you see like Amphenol, only a very small buy. Nvidia only 31 million in new buys. That's way down. Taiwan Semi. Banco Santander with a big $16 billion buy this past month. TEL, which has had good earnings the week before last, also continues with 230 million. AIR with 8 billion. And overall, Micron with not much, even though that stock has been showing a lot of strength. Robinhood, those are coming in light. Seagate with 670 million, that's still going. And ORA, stock I'm unfamiliar with 14 billion. So that is it. Nothing notable other than a handful of names, as well as a decline in some of the bigger large caps. Earnings for the week ahead. CoreWeave reports Tower Semi, TeraWulf, Nebius. So the data center will continue after IREN reported this past week. Oklo, Cisco, AMAT, and New Holdings. And some of the biggest winners on the week, Lemonade with a huge gap on earnings, as well as SI Time, a couple biotechs, Eli Lilly with strong earnings, Micron, Rambus, and the losers, NVIDIA down 7, AMD down 8, and Credo down 12, Symbotic. So big split there, but definitely some earnings winners, as we will see in the charts. Let's go to the indexes and inter-asset correlation. Starting with a daily on the S&P, we can see that successful test and undercut of the 50-day, followed by close at the highs of the day, which is bullish overall. It shows a continued trend of successful tests of the 10-week and 50-day and hold since the April follow-through day. RSP obviously still not doing much, relative strength lagging, down only 0.2 on the week though. Q's down 3% on the week, closed just above that 10-week moving average. Tested it intraday and bounced and closed at the highs of the day on Friday on big volume. So again, definitely what you want to see, but there is deterioration going on and a weakening of momentum in many names. Q equal weight down 2.6, didn't fare as well, but still hanging on to that 10-week, or just below the 10-week and the 50-day, although reversed as well. Dow bounced off that 10-week, mid caps just below that 10-week, down 0.1%. Russell also tested that 10-week, intercut it during the week, closed down 1.88%, but below the 50-day moving average. So again, nice bounce and undercut that 2393 level from back in the beginning of October and reclaimed it. So very choppy lately there. VIX closed below 20, but was up 9.4% on the week. And the dollar index down slightly on the week. Gold managed to close up just about flat on the week, holding that 10-week moving average. The miners right around that 10-week moving average. Silver down 0.2%, 2 weekly tests of that 10-week moving average and holding, looking a little bit better than the rest of the metals. And Bitcoin defending the 100,000 level and closed right at the 40-week moving average. It's been directionless and now broke the 200-day, but closed right about on that 200-day on Friday. Bonds were down on the week. The 30-year bond yield climbed 3 basis points on the week to 4.7%, and the 10-year climbed 0.8 of a basis point at 4.09%, so relatively flat there. Mags were down 3.4. Going in quickly to the Mag 7, Apple holding that breakout. Amazon on earnings, which we will get into. Microsoft down 4%, right at the bottom of this flat base, one of the weaker names in the Mag 7. Meta broke the 40-week and the 200-day moving average this week. as it continued its sell-off from the week before on high spending levels. Nvidia down 7%, getting rejected on last week's breakout, and but did hold the 50-day moving average. And Google still holding strong, down slightly on the week. Netflix below that 40-week moving average. And just quickly wanted to point out a couple of the weakest names in the RG8 here. IBD 50 down 9.29% on the week. And the ARC was down 9.25% on the week. Overall, let's just take a quick look at our watch list for the week. Excuse me one second. Here we go. Let's just look at the industry ETFs. Uranium down 13% on the week. The nuke group was also down about 11.7%, closed right below that 10-week moving average. IBD 50 we covered. So several of these ETFs were down pretty substantially during the week. On the upside, let's resort this. We've got natural gas, UNG, which was up 5% on the week. Solar seems to be one of the leading groups, up 2.5% this past week, and just really trending nicely. If we go to the daily chart, it's been holding that 21-day moving average. Tends to be a little volatile, but definitely holding that 21-day. Jets, despite talks of shutting down flights because of the shutdown, was still up 2.4% on the week. And the oil and gas exploration group was up 1.8% on the week, and banking held up, and XLE. So overall, definitely some names doing okay out there. Healthcare as well. So some of the pharmaceuticals acting well, up 1.3%. So let's get into the watch list. Still a relatively robust watch list, sorted by weekly gains to display really the earnings gap and standouts of the week. GMED with a big 38% gain on the week, coming off the bottom of this cup base through the 200-day moving average. JFrog, another name with a blue dot on earnings, up 26%. This is a enterprise software company that's breaking out to multi-year highs here. EOSE, this has been on the watch list, and this is a Pittsburgh battery company. I believe they had earnings this week on Thursday, and really broke out of this flag on Friday on big volume. So this is definitely a name to keep an eye on in this battery area, which is a key missing link for solar energy, as well as other alternative energy technologies becoming viable. Expedia broke out on earnings, up 17% on big volume on the week. SanDisk, Toddzilla, and TurboTection Holding had earnings on Friday and absolutely knocked the ball out of the park for guidance in the upcoming quarter. Just astounding. And watch these numbers go up during the day on Friday from like $17 for 2027 to $19. This was down around $8 to $11 a share. The stock is trading at really around 10, 11 times 2027 numbers for 200% growth in 26 and 72% growth in 27. So again, quite extended, but really the 8 EMA has been the only thing allowing you to get into this stock. We bought this on the high type flag breakout, and it's never looked back. So, Century Aluminum, another name with earnings, up 11% on the week. DQ, this is a solar, Canadian solar, which manufactures, I believe, most of their cells in China, was up 2.57% on the week. Wayfair, really, despite a lot of consumer stocks, restaurants acting extremely weak, Wayfair has had this nice earnings gap uh, pullback on lighter volume and then resurgence on Friday on a pocket pivot. Uh, so this has been on the watch list. Big earnings growth, not much in the sales department, but definitely standing out as a lone soldier in that area. ALB down 1%, but bounced off the 10-week, had earnings this week. CSIQ, huge gain this week, up 37% on earnings coming out next week. But Solar Group, there's some massive moves going on. What I really find attractive about this is this volume that's taken place the last 2 weeks. Whenever you see this cluster of high volume and this sharp move, that's extremely bullish. That's institutional accumulation. And then if we go to the monthly chart, as I like to look at, we can see 33% gain 3 months ago, 59% gain last month, 37% gain this month. These monthly gains continue. And look at the monthly volume last month, and now not even a quarter of the way through this month. And we're already seeing big volume for the month. So notable in solar. Comstock Resources and oil and gas exploration up 22% on earnings this week. SQM broke out of this nice little flat base last week and really a 2-week tight this week. Fastly shouldn't be on the list as it doesn't meet our volume liquidity requirements. Nonetheless, had a nice earnings gap that got on there by mistake. Dave had earnings this week, traded flat, but it's definitely still holding in this giant kind of square box type formation, I would call it. Fluence Energy down 1%. QuantumScape, this is another battery company, traded relatively tight this week. Well, down 9%. Let's see. On the daily, came back nicely on Friday. EOSE appears to be the leader in the battery space right now. This was a nice earnings pop here. Xometry, this company, I believe, allows you to manufacture custom parts and prints them, 3D printing perhaps. This was notable. Big volume this week, up 33%. You can see this really gapped up, was up substantially on earnings. Let's get to that day, up 28% on a 327% increase in volume. Second day higher high, pulled back to the top of the range and then broke out again on Friday. And look at the numbers, 936 and 130% earnings growth, over 20% growth with very strong sales after multiple quarters of triple-digit earnings prior. So very notable, definitely a name to keep an eye on, and it trades just shy of our 60 million average daily volume, but that could catch up pretty quickly. Carpenter specialty metal play up 3.8% on the week. SoFi undercut and held the 10-week. We got stopped out of that name in our portfolios this week. Cloudflare reversal on the week. Solar Edge with a huge reversal, up 13% on the week, almost 14%. Had this really wicked intraday shakeout on earnings with a comeback here that's notable on huge volume on Friday. So you're definitely seeing some institutional footprints in solar. Cardinal with a follow through after the previous week. Semtech has earnings coming up, but trading nice and tight in this 15% flat base. Hut 8 tested the 10-week moving average with earnings this past week. This is a Bitcoin miner. This group saw a pretty nasty interweek sell-off, but held the 50-day moving average. So potentially an opportunity to take some positions in some of these names. GM, new 52-week high this week. Robinhood undercut that 10-week moving average, held and closed just above it. This is a new name, SGI, which broke out of a double bottom base this week. This is a mattress company, makes Sealy, Tempur-Pedic, some of the big brand name mattresses, broke out of a double bottom base, and this does trade liquid enough, with relative strength shooting up to new highs on earnings this week. Intel, down about 4% this week with semiconductor weakness. Cummins Engines, nice week, up 8% on earnings. These are big power generation plays as well as their engines drive backup generators. Caterpillar actually makes some gas turbines, so this group is benefiting from the data center. CCJ down 9% on earnings this week, but bounced right off the 10-week moving average. ISRG follow through at 4.8%. Slower name previewed on the previous week's gap up list. Followed through and made a higher high this week. This is an institutional favorite. CommScope, this was a Toddzilla holding. I stopped out of it on this interweek cut of the 21-day moving average, but overall trading tight, and I'm going to keep my eye on this, but these lower price stocks should be position size smaller. Some of the oil and gas names showed up on the list this week. This is a refiner, HF St. Clair, with a 6% gain on the week on earnings, trading in a pretty tight base. SPXC previewed this last week on the earnings gap with a 2-week tight, basically bounced off that 8-day moving average and holding nicely and building a flag formation. Nebius with earnings next week held the 10-week moving average. BTSG basically a 3-week tight. DuPont broke out, up 16% on the week on, I don't know if there was a corporate event or something that happened here. I'm not sure what that means, but it broke out on it. Maybe a reverse stock split. I don't know. No, couldn't be. ATEC, follow through of 4%. This is the spinal company that reported earnings gapped up. Now we're seeing the ants formation. 1,000% growth for 2026. A few strings of triple-digit earnings growth. So potentially a name to watch is a smaller name. MDB broke out this week and squatted a little bit. CrowdStrike flat, 2 weeks tight. FTI, this is another oil and gas player, and this was up 3.6%, looking strong. Rambus, despite a fairly weak earnings report, still closed up 4.7% on the week with these storage companies. Held the 21 and 8-day moving average. RTX defense 3-week tight. NVT backed off about 2.9% after last week's earnings gap. VSAT basically just trending above the 10-week moving average here. Not much to say. ERJ, a Toddzilla holding, is now in a 3-week tight formation, down 0.12%. So relative strength hanging in there and just trading above the 8-day moving average, as I bought it right on this pullback after the breakout. And so far it's held. And not much momentum here, but looking better relative to the market. Deutsche Bank, new name on the list. WGS. I stopped out of this week at break even just because, it broke this 3-day level here, but it did hold and bounce off that 21-day moving average. But I was looking to reduce exposure as the market got weaker and just broke even on it. Insight, 13% follow through this week on earnings from the previous week, and then follow through. This is a biotech name. Amphenol, somebody mentioned I had taken this off the list, and I really don't, I'm not in it, or definitely showed up on the watch list and has been on the watch list, but it's just trending higher. It's a bellwether in the AI area. Futu bounced off the 10-week. Zscaler, not much to say. Credo, let's look at Credo in a little more detail. Earnings are coming up, I believe, in a couple weeks. Yeah. Undercut that 50-day moving average, reclaimed the 21-day. So it's gotten very choppy here. This is a big pullback, relatively speaking. Big pullback here below that 50-day. Been tough. I did try this name. I tried this name on a 60 stochastic cross on Wednesday, and then stopped out when it broke Tuesday's lows here on Thursday. Avoided this shakeout on Friday, but I thought it could be a good entry point, but it ended up just, when the market's in a bad position like it was this week, you're going to get shaken out of a lot of stocks if you don't keep your stops tight. Helmet Aerospace looking good. Guardian Health followed through with another 4% gain after earnings the previous week. AVAV, this was a Toddzilla holding, sold most of it into strength a few weeks back, and tested the 10-week moving average and held the 50-day after an undercut. So again, we'll see. We're coming into a seasonally strong period. However, things have gotten much more choppy and momentum has definitely waned and the leaders have gotten weaker. So these things at best need some tightening, need some basing, it looks like. ARGX up 4% post the previous week's earnings. Seagate followed through again with storage being the leader right now in AI. That was up 9% on the week. Datadog with a nice breakout on earnings this week, up 17% on the week and breaking into multi-year high territory, testing these 2021 levels now. We often see the game where these back off of these highs, potentially run right through it if they're strong, but maybe want to see a 3-week tight, a 2-week tight, some consolidation or a flat base, whatever it may be. Patience is most likely in order, but it did have a nice breakout. Light, a Toddzilla holding, up 19% on earnings this week. Another hit the ball out of the park quarter from Light. A little bit of a reversal on Thursday, but, again, I am going to just continue to see how this rides. And so far, the 8-day and the 21 have been the key support for this. Johnson Controls broke out on earnings this week. TEL we had on the watch list, a little pullback. Lemonade was another software company that broke out, up 24.8% on the week. Had a nice breakout, a little bit of volatility. However, this is a nice breakout out of this kind of triple top area. If you look at the weekly here, this is moving into multi-year high territory. Micron, another 6.3%. This is a Toddzilla holding. It's been a very nice stock. BWXT tested the 10-week on earnings. This is really one of the few nuke plays that has fundamentals in earnings because they're a government contractor. Held the 10-week moving average, faring better than really any of the other nuke plays. Valero, another refiner, which was up 3% and looking to potentially break out of this base. It's a flat base. AppLovin held the 10-week on earnings, down 2.7%. VIX pulling back. Applied Digital, this is another data center name, which pulled back, down 10% on the week. Extended, right in between the 21 and the 50-day. Tower Semi with earnings next week. Western Digital continues in the storage space. New holdings getting tight up here after this long period of basing. They report earnings next week, so I suspect that'll be a breakout or a breakdown event for their earnings, but good numbers here. Southern Copper trading tight. Medpace Holdings up slightly on the week. Symbiotic pulling back this week. Snowflake, a little bit of a pullback, 4%. Alibaba earnings next week, holding the 10-week. Overall, backing off from this strong move and undercut the 50-day and reclaimed it on Friday with earnings. Ambo with a blue dot, wanted to put this on the list this week in this 22% base. Very interesting. KLA, 2-week tight. Sienna, another frozen rope in this fiber optic area. At best, inter-day cuts of the 8-day moving average. Held that 8-day moving average. This is just extremely strong action. And this is another name along with a Light acting very well. This is another name up 7%. Geothermal power play broke into new high territory the last few weeks. Huge volume this past week. AEIS up 6.9%. Following on earnings, Bloom Energy continuing to hold Sanmina with earnings this past week. This is a contract manufacturer up 24%. This is where the strength is. Data centers, contract manufacturers are making the networking components, AI components. It's a strong ecosystem right now. Eli Lilly up 7% on earnings, and we had put this on the watch list for the last couple of weeks, and it's trending nicely up the right side. First Solar, small gain on the week, but this is another 8-day moving average, 21-day moving average riding stock right now. Avgo pulled back 5% on the week. Lam Research hanging in there. AMD 8.9% pullback on the week, undercut the 21-day moving average. I'm still holding my core position, but did pare back a quarter of it this week on the break of the 21-day. Although still up nicely on it, AMD tends to be a volatile stock as it is. VRT down 6%. Next Tracker, again, huge mutual fund buys, up 3% on the week. Another name that's just been a frozen rope here. IBM just dangling in the pivot zone. Teva earnings breakout up 17%. TTMI, another contract manufacturer that reported the week before last with a 2-week tight. TeraWulf reports on Monday after the close. This is another data center name. Marvell, there were rumors that SoftBank was buying them this past week. Stock has been a little bit choppy, but only down 3% on the week, and reclaimed the 8-day moving average after undercutting the 21-day on Friday. FN, another contract manufacturer, hanging in there, up 1%, 2%. Corning broke the 21-day moving average, down 4% this week. Very extended name, but a bellwether. Sterling, not much to say there. Coherent, another earnings gapper this week, up 17%. This is another name that makes networking connection equipment and had a nice earnings gap. Broke the lows of that, but reclaimed it on Friday. Pure Storage, Toddzilla took a position in this on Friday. This is, again, one of these plays that has had the ability to show a big move after an earnings gap. First real test of the 50-day moving average. I bought this right about here coming out of this, and my stop will be a breach of those lows. Very tight stop of 2-3%. This is what I like to do. And if I gain traction, I just hold them. Very simple. Low risk entries, stocks that have shown progress, first test of the 10-week moving average, slightly elevated volume, but nonetheless, this is in the storage group, and took a position in it. Form Factor pulled back this week. Tesla, about a 6% pullback this week after the pay package announcement, trading in a flat base. ARM, 10% drop on earnings this week. SiteTime, big 12% gain on earnings this week. This is another semiconductor equipment. Not an equipment, sorry. Solaris, Celestica pulled back this week, down 6%. Extended, Carmen Holdings basically held the 10-week IREN with earnings this week. Really, for IREN, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to call this like a 5-6 week tight up here. A little bit choppy, but I don't see it doing anything wrong. And it signed that big $10 billion deal with Microsoft. Held the 21-day moving average. A little bit too volatile right now, but I would look to re-enter this if it tightened up again. Sell should not be on the list. ARLO should not be on the list. Looks like missed taking those off. Well, thank you for listening to this weekend's review. If you have any questions, my name is Todd Thomas. You can reach me at todd@revereasset.com by email. You can follow me on Twitter at ToddMichael70. If you'd like to become a client, Our number is 855 Real Wealth. Ask to talk to Don or Dan. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.